evening, everybody, and welcome. Welcome to our fourth and final debate. It's great to have you all with us this evening. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Helen Blue, the current Agri Chairman for Devon Young Farmers. Once again, we're really fortunate to have four fantastic speakers, which are going to be discussing the topic of how can we combat rural isolation and the impacts of mental health. So an incredibly important topic, I'm sure you'll all agree. Once again, we're incredibly privileged to have Mr. David Fursdon, Lord Lieutenant of Devon, but also our very own Devon YFC President, chairing this evening's meeting. So I'll just run through the structure of this evening. So first of all, we will be starting with each panellist just giving their opening remarks and introducing themselves. This would be followed by a period of discussion, debate, and we really welcome questions. So if anyone has any questions throughout the debate, please, you'll find the chat button at the bottom of your screen, click on there, and you will be able to write out your question, and either myself or the chairman will bring it to the panelists. So that's about it for me. So without any further ado, I'll pass over to our chairman. Thank you.
Welcome everybody, and it would be great, I could say it'd be great to see you, but of course we can't see you, so we hope you're behaving wherever you are and that you enjoy this debate. As Helen says, the fourth in our series, and by no means the least, and dealing with probably one of the most difficult questions that we have debated. Please do feel free to use the chat box, and not just questions. If you've got comments as well that you want to make, then do feel free to do that as well. Now I'm going to be asking our panelists to say a little bit about themselves and link that to the title of the debate this evening. And then I'm going to ask them a few questions after they've spoken, and then we will get back to having all of them on screen, and we'll have a little bit of a discussion between ourselves, and then we'll pick up your questions. So that's the plan. And if I can start by introducing Ruth Poulten to you. Ruth is a consultant at NFU Mutual, dealing with corporate social responsibility issues, and she's had a lot of experience in the media generally, Sky News, Talk Sport, and business in the community. And she works closely with the Samaritans and the Farming Community Network and the Prince's Countryside Fund, which I'm delighted about, as I am a trustee of that fund. She also chairs the NFU Mutual's Responsible Business Steering Group. So, Ruth, if you would like to start us off by giving us a little bit of background about you and mental health, please, that would be great.
Thank you, David, and good evening to everyone who's listening in. Thank you so much for joining us in what I absolutely believe is such an important debate, and probably more critical than absolutely ever, considering where we are with the pandemic. A little bit about myself, David. I think you've probably summed it all up, but just to add a bit more colour, I've worked in rural Lincolnshire, I've worked in Cornwall, and I've worked in rural Northumberland. And so feel that I have absolutely experienced some of those issues around rural isolation. But actually now I live in Warwickshire, I think very much so in the last 7 months, 6 to 7 months, hand on heart, yeah, I've had a few struggles of my own in lockdown, and had to really try and unpick and work out what it was going to take for me to kind of get through every day. Some of those things were going for walks by myself. I have 3 children, very busy household, but I absolutely needed to get away from them at times, as much as I love them dearly, and trying to remain positive and be thankful and grateful for all the positive things I had in my life. There have been other times in my life where I have sort of struggled and had to reach out for help to friends and family. I suffered a bereavement at a very young age. and I did suffer from postnatal depression. So I absolutely do understand about how important the support networks that there are out there, whether they are those professional ones or indeed friends and family that can help. So moving on into where I am now, I'm a corporate social responsibility consultant. I'm feeling extremely lucky to do the job that I do. So I'm working in business, but really really to try and help push on some of those really important societal issues. So my role is effectively bridging the gap between organisations in the community and NFU Mutual. So such a really valuable role. I'm so grateful to have that. It's clear that the COVID pandemic has created new and increasing challenges for our rural communities right across the generations. And our customers have told us about how they feel trapped inside their homes, unable to engage in their usual daily activities, the strain of juggling work and family life, and the huge financial pressures due to job losses or furlough. Pre-COVID, we were already aware that poor rural broadband was and remains a key concern for people in the southwest, alongside other rural challenges, including a lack of amenities and regular public transport, reduced employment opportunities, and rural crime, which all contribute to rural isolation. For many people, these issues can also lead to feelings of heightened anxiety and fear about the future. In addition, farming can be a very lonely occupation, with long hours spent out in the field, with little or no form of social interaction, and all the worries that go with it, like Brexit, new technology, health problems, and unpredictable weather events, to name a few. In most cases, a farmer's place of business is often their home, meaning it's not easy to get away from the workload. The stark and shocking fact is that agriculture has the second highest risk of suicide of any industry, at almost twice the national average. The contributing factors are highly stressful environment, long hours, isolation, stigma around mental health, and financial pressures. We recognise that business has a vital role to play in tackling some of these issues, and supporting our communities is at the heart of our approach at NFU Mutual. In 2014, we set up the Farm Safety Foundation, primarily to help the farmers of the future through farm safety and mental health training. And through the NFU Mutual Charitable Trust, we've long supported charities that take care of farmers and families in rural communities to ensure the countryside and the farming industry remains healthy. This year, we were able to donate £2 million to help plug the funding shortfall charities were facing due to cancelled fundraising events because of COVID. The money helped charities stay open, supporting helplines, outreach, and mentoring initiatives, enabling communities to stay strong and resilient. As I've said, I'm fortunate to work with some of those amazing charities, such as Samaritans, Rural Support in Northern Ireland, RSABI in Scotland, and the RABI and Farming Community Network in England and Wales, all of whom offer helplines, practical advice, and pastoral support. It's perhaps no surprise to hear that mental well-being, financial concerns, and family relationships have been the top 3 issues to FCN's helpline through the spring and summer months this year. All that said, I'm pleased to say there are many positives. We've learned that many of our customers have found new hobbies during lockdown or are pursuing existing ones like gardening and long walks. They're talking more and turning to friends, family and neighbours for help, as well as using telephone helplines and e-counselling for support. In fact, connecting with family and friends is the online activity that's increased the most since lockdown began. And according to research commissioned by Samaritans into how the pandemic's affected the mental health of men in Great Britain, around 1/3 of men in rural communities say that talking to others helped with concerns and worries they had during lockdown. So let's keep talking and working together, regardless of the pandemic, to help change the lives of those who need it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ruth. And if I just could come back on a couple of questions for you. It's interesting you talked about your own experience of needing to just get away and get outside and go for a walk and so on. And yet some of what we're talking about is the opposite of that, the stresses of being away and off and on your own, which a lot of farmers experience. How do you square those two? I mean, they seem to be pushing in opposite directions, the need for solitude and the worry about being on your own.
Wow, that's a fantastic question, David. And I mean, I am not a farmer, first and foremost, so I can only imagine what that solitude and that loneliness brings to people who work in that industry, with all the pressures that I read about and I hear about from people who come and talk to us, from our customers who share those experiences with us. For myself, I've absolutely craved the need to get away from the stresses and strains of that everyday life. And I talked about the juggle during lockdown of homeschool. Well, it was the juggle of homeschooling and work, the collision of both those things for me personally, with the feelings of being trapped. And I felt those feelings too, inside sort of four walls. Yet at the same time, we had our farming community, their day jobs out in the field. So I don't know if we can square that circle, David. I think they are just two very different things. And ultimately, what I would say is that everybody has to find their own way of coping and dealing with those pressures. And of course, that's exactly why we're here today talking about that, because everyone has a different experience in terms of how they deal with those pressures.
And that's interesting about people having the same experiences. I mean, you've lived in Lincolnshire, Northumberland, Cornwall. Have you found them similar? Do you think that it's much the same across the country? I mean, okay, we're the Devon Young Farmers, but even within Devon, we would expect probably to have similar issues from the others.
Yes, and I think my own personal experiences are absolutely that there are different experiences, definitely from region to region and county to county, and I think the research that I've done at NFU Mutual absolutely reflects that. So what's critical in Yorkshire is not so critical in the southwest. So we know that broadband, from our research, poor rural broadband was up there as the #1 key issue when it comes to rural isolation. But I know in Northumberland it was about poor rural transport. So, but equally, having lived there, I know that poor rural broadband is equally a problem. So I think they're shared issues. It's just that they're to a lesser or a greater extent.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, you'll be relieved to know that in Devon, broadband is just as bad in a lot of places as anywhere else. And we're hoping that NFU Mutual will be having a quiet word with the government and saying, one thing they could do is improve that rural broadband. So thank you very much. Can we come now, please, to Martin Beck? And Martin has been a police officer for 26 years, and he's been leading Devon and Cornwall Police to deliver a lot of the national rural crime priorities, and he's involved in rural crime issues. And he's particularly been working on the uplands, in the moors, and in the vulnerable areas. And he's dealt with a whole range of crime in rural areas, and he's got an enormous experience of that. And one of the things which has already been mentioned is that fear of rural crime and experience of rural crime is one of the things which can trigger mental issues amongst the people who've been the victims of it. So, Martin, if I could invite you to say a few words to us.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, everybody. It's not very often I get to speak to a large audience like this. I'm really grateful to be here and discuss some of these really important issues. Of course, you mentioned that I've been in the police for a fair amount of time. Let's just look at it on that journey. During the early 90s, it wasn't like we look at mental health now. It wasn't an understood subject. It wasn't perhaps treated properly, certainly by the police. I think that journey's been quite good up to now, and we need to keep on going because there has been a stigma about it, and it's important we discuss it. It's important we know that it's a normal part of our lives, and that all of, or nearly all of us, in the past, now, or in the future, may suffer from it. So nothing to be ashamed or embarrassed about. And one message that probably at the end I should reiterate is that we should be reaching out to each other and working together to safeguard each other. So my main role is I'm obviously a police constable. I'm at the bottom of the chain, but I'm also part of a very small and hard-working team of officers. There's 4 of us now in Devon and Cornwall, purely looking at the rural strategy, which is a national strategy. I'll just mention what they are very quickly. So we have agricultural plant and vehicle theft. I mention these because these are things which can trigger mental health when there's a build-up of issues on your farm or on your small business or at home. And some of these things can just push you a little bit further to having some depression or anxiety about those things. So there's agricultural plant and vehicle theft, when your quad bike gets taken or fuel gets stolen. So fuel thefts, equine crime, fuel and battery theft, fly tipping, and poaching. So those are the core subjects which I'm actually looking at and my colleagues for the force. We also look at wildlife crime with a number of wildlife crime officers around the county, which we help coordinate. And we just started to look at the impact of heritage crime. And there's an awful lot of our heritage and cultural culture, which is in Devon and Cornwall, which we should be looking after and should be looking after for younger people. So I work in the prevention department. I don't work from a police station, perhaps in uniform as you see people in the blue lights on their cars racing around. I work to support those officers. Also in my department, we have the child centre policing team. There's problem solvers. We have the integrated offending team, the device communities team, crime prevention, the neighbourhood policing, drug and alcohol harm, and mental health. But we work alongside them all to support, obviously, the officers out there. I think our journey has been quite interesting. And I think the improvements we've seen have been quite dramatic over the years. And I've seen things come in like the policing mission. We didn't have a mission before, but we've had it for quite a few years now. And it starts off by saying we detect and prevent vulnerable people. So we detect crime, prevent harm, and protect vulnerable people, followed by safeguarding communities and neighbourhoods. So it says it there how important it is, right at the start of our force mission, that our objectives are to safeguard the vulnerable. And to do that, there's lots of things that have happened over the years. Certainly in the most recent years, there's been some training within the police, not just how to recognise mental health in the communities and our neighbourhoods, but also how to recognise mental health amongst our own staff. Because officers do go to a lot of stressful incidents repetitively. And of course, they're all human and they suffer from the same issues that we're all going to suffer eventually. So the training's been quite good. We've also have a new system of vulnerability screening tool. So when we do come across somebody who needs for harm or needs some help, we've got a way of feeding that the information, the problem into the health service. And there's a whole range of other agencies that can help people nowadays. And in effect, we're not the big banks. We are there to recognise these issues and help people and signpost them and get them help. Of course, the first stage of that is recognising you have an issue and let's sort it out. The next big thing which I'm really excited about working with the prevention department is modernising policing. And that's quite a big thing going on at the moment. That's embedding problem-solving policing into community engagement at the heart of what we do, and understanding the community needs. But it all comes back to, we want to try to build healthy, safe communities. So gone are the days really we used to race around and, you know, it's great being a policeman driving around fast and kicking doors in and things like this. But, you know, what's more important, we have healthy and safety communities. I think externally, you've probably seen perhaps some of that with the police. You've seen us perhaps approach things slightly differently because of that training. I know more recently, certainly this summer, the commissioner's paid for a pilot, I think it was a commissioner. We have a joint mental health response cars in certain towns in Cornwall, down Helston Way, Plymouth, Torbay and Exeter. We've seen health professionals and Liverpool South West and police officers in cars together going to places quite quickly to put that emergency care in, which has been really, really successful. What else can I say about what we've been up to? I think one of the main things to say is that we need to work together, and I have obviously been working in this role for the last 18 months. I've had fantastic support, and I think although primarily I deal with crime issues, other issues in our rural communities are equally as important, which is why I'm really pleased to be working with Young Farmers and FCN and Trading Standards and other people who have got good projects going on And if we can just be a small part of that, it will just hopefully make things a lot better.
Thank you, Martin, very much. And if I could just ask you a couple of things. One of the things in my experience that does really take its toll on farmers is dog attacks on their livestock. And certainly in our village, in recent few years, we have had a series of horrific dog attacks, leaving injured sheep and lying in the hedgerows or on the edge of the road. And there is, of course, the usual complete denial by dog owners that their dogs are anything other than perfectly sweet and cuddly, even when they've got sort of blood coming out of their mouth. So I just wondered whether you get much of that, whether your fellow officers have to deal with that, and how one can deal with members of the public to educate them better to protect farmers from that impact.
Thank you. That's something which is really key to some of the work we're doing. I should have mentioned in our priorities, livestock offences is one of our national priorities. So livestock theft as well. But worrying is a massive concern. We've done a lot of work internally to raise awareness of the issue, that it's not a simple, it's a summary offence, therefore it's not important. Actually, it's the effects that has on the farmer. Not just it's a cruel thing that's happened, the effect that it's actually had on them and his mental health. The public's been really, most of the public, most dog walkers have been supportive. And we've been doing a fair bit of work on social media and on TV, I think it was ITV more recently, just raising awareness that the law says about keeping your dog under close control. And I'm not sure people understand that your dog playing with a sheep is a crime, but it is. And so one of the messages we try to get out to say is close control means having your dog on a short lead, or it's near you that you can recall it. It shouldn't be chasing sheep. It shouldn't be, in their words, playing with sheep. If it is, they'll get in trouble. And the simple thing is, if you know that your dog has issues with recall, then there's a really simple thing to do, and it's just slip a lead on near sheep. I know obviously cattle are slightly different, but certainly the main thing is when it comes to sheep is we can save all these problems, but just by slipping that lead on. If you happen to see a dog out of control, then perhaps let us know. We want, obviously, livestock issues are massively underreported as well. And we would encourage landowners or farmers of sheep to report it to us. I play a bit of a numbers game, unfortunately, because on the police, for resourcing things, if it's not a figure on the systems, it probably hasn't happened in the eyes of the people who allocate the resources. So if we indicate truly what the issue is, then we can have a better balance, a better response towards it. So really, we're trying to get a good message to the public about, have good control. You know your dog has an issue with livestock. You know it's more interested in chasing that sheep than listening to you. Then put a lead on near livestock. Simple as that, and to report things to us.
Thank you, and I think a good message there about needing to report for your statistics to show that there is an issue. Can we move now to Alice? Now, Alice Giles grew up on a family farm and now lives with her fiancé Rich on a sheep and arable farm in South Devon. And she has worked for a children's charity. For 8 years, she worked for a children's charity which covered mental health as part of what they did. And of course, she is well versed in the ways of YFC and was chairman of Devon YFC in 2019 when she championed the subject of mental health and herself did suicide awareness training and took a lead and gave some publicity to the issue. So Alice, a great track record on this subject. Perhaps you'd say a little bit more about yourself and about mental health issues.
Well, thank you, Mr. President, for your kind introduction, and thank you to Helen and Devon YFC for inviting me to be part of this debate this evening. And just congratulations to Devon for keeping these agri-debates going. It's a real showcase of your resilience during this difficult year. So I come from a farming background, I come from a YFC background, was a BO Young Farmers member for 15 years before I took on Devon YFC Chairman. And part of that year I was part of the training team which delivered the Rural Plus mental health awareness course to YFC clubs across the county, and sort of really hopefully open the door to young members talking about those kind of issues. Prior to that, within my career, I worked for a children's charity for 8 years, started off at Barnardo's and then moved to Action for Children. When I first started there, I was just 19 and, well, didn't know much about anything, to be honest. And the first year there, and really the whole time I worked there, was a massive eye-opener to me. I was meeting people who were from similar backgrounds to me, from small villages, rural towns, family farms, and just seeing all the variety of issues that they were dealing with. And mental health was a massive part of that. And just watching them really struggle to function as families, which kind of was a bit alien to me, to be honest. And it really made me realise that just because we live in these areas, we live rurally and in these little communities, doesn't mean that we don't face the same issues that we might assume are more related to people living in bigger cities. So we can still feel anxious and stressed and alone, isolated, overwhelmed. But for us here, living and working rurally, and particularly in farming, it almost feels that we're more vulnerable with our mental health becoming poor. If we think about farming, it's not just our job, but it's our life, it's our lifestyle, it's our income. We often spend a lot more time on our own, working a lot longer hours. So with that in mind, I think there's a real need for us rurally and in the farming community to better equip ourselves with the skills that we need to not only recognise when people we care about might be having issues, but also our issues ourselves, so that we can recognise when is the time to try and get help, or just to have a chat about something. Hopefully last year, when we delivered the Rural Plus course to the members across the county, it helped open up those conversations, possibly for the first time for a lot of the younger members, and really hopefully opened up some of the skills that I think people in our communities need really to make mental health more ordinary. You know, let's feel this about our mental health as we do about our physical health. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice, very much. Could you just sort of, from your experience, what, if you were saying to a farming family that there is the most important signal that they could look for that somebody was suffering from mental health issues, would you be able to isolate one issue and say that's really very common, that's actually, you know, how people react in particular, and that, you know, to look for that in particular?
Wow, that's a really good question. I mean, I suppose, firstly, I'm no mental health expert or worker, so don't quote me on it. But I suppose mental health is so wide, and people can really deal with things in such different ways. And it's so easy for us farming, you know, we're already slightly isolated. We can easily isolate ourselves more. And I suppose that was the one thing that we would often talk about in the Rural Plus sessions is, have you got a member in your Young Farmers Club who you don't really see very often? Perhaps they used to be really active and now they're taking some time away from young farmers. Those are sometimes the ones that we want to check in on a bit more. We all have busy periods of our work. You know, if you're stuck in the lambing shed or you're busy calving, you're working on harvest. And I'm sure we can all understand when you wouldn't see somebody during that period. But sometimes when people just slip through the net, it's really easy for us to say that we're really, really busy all the time. And we probably are most of the time, but the reality is we can all at some stage take a break. That will be easier for some people than others. So I suppose in Rural Plus, when we were discussing it with the members, it was the importance of not just letting people slip through the net, not just letting them say they're always busy and they don't want to come, because maybe there is a reason why they're isolating themselves or making that harder for themselves. Have they got something else going on that they just don't want to face, or they don't want someone else to pick up on?
Okay, well, thank you. And it sounds to me like it's just behaviour that doesn't feel normal. That there's something just seems to be a bit different about what that person is, and that might be not turning up when they were a regular attender or whatever. So thank you. Okay, so if we can go now to Jo Jones, who is a tenant dairy farmer near Crediton with her husband Will, and on the third farm that they've had as tenants of the Devon County Council, I suppose it is, Devon County Council Farm Estate. And they've been there, and Jo is a registered nurse working part-time, and has quite a lot of background in other health areas like GP surgery and so on. She is the assistant coordinator for FCN in Devon, and I know that FCN have been in the front line of a lot of this, and is a fantastic charity if you aren't aware of it, and one that's well worth supporting. And I think young farmers are familiar with FCN, and therefore a number of you may well be familiar with Jo. But Jo, over to you, please.
Thank you, David, and thank you very much for asking me to be part of this debate. So I'm an ex-young farmer, now on an advisory for Bow Young Farmers, and we're now on our third farm, as you mentioned, as tenants, and we're now on a private farm, having started off on the council estate. As you said, I also work part-time as a nurse, and I've been working for the FCN charity in Devon for just over 10 years. And I initially decided to get involved after a family member suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder after foot and mouth. And I've also had several sort of family members that have suffered from anxiety and depression at times. So I'm not an expert in mental health. I'm not mental health nurse trained, but I have experience of lots of mental health issues through my role as a general nurse, and also through my work with the Farming Community Network charity. And I've done several courses in mental health awareness, suicide prevention, and also recently in traumatic risk management intervention training. And I see a lot of people affected by mental health in rural areas. As Alice mentioned, we were involved in delivering a programme together to all the clubs in Devon. And sadly, at the end of that, the members were asked to fill in a questionnaire, and over half of them, or around 50%, said they'd had experience of a mental health issue themselves. So that just really raises the importance of how important this, how big this issue is in rural areas. And also through FCN, we would get around 100 new cases referrals each year, and all of those would have a degree of stress or mental health as an element in those cases. So I just wanted to briefly go over some of the ways I think we can combat this issue. One of them is education, as you've mentioned with Alice, being aware of signs and symptoms and how you can help people. FCN is happy to provide training for organisations and groups. We've got an online suicide prevention course coming up soon in October, which is open to anybody with an interest in that in the farming community, so they can get in touch. We've got lots of resources and leaflets we can provide as well. And it's about asking twice if somebody's okay, not just taking that standard response of, oh yeah, I'm fine. Check on each other, especially as we've mentioned with COVID, that it's been hard for people to get out and carry on with their normal social activities, which for them might be their only release and escape from the farm. So it's really important to actually ask direct questions and say, oh, you seem a bit down at the moment. Is there anything that's bothering you? And if someone's been through a stressful life event, then, don't be afraid to ask them a question and say, I hear you've been through a bit of a tough time. Is there anything I can do to help? So just try to be available for that chat or a cup of coffee. If you can meet face to face and it's safe to do so, that's always better than on the phone, because often you can pick up how someone's really feeling from their sort of non-verbal cues as well. And it's okay to be honest and say, I'm not sure what to say, but I'm here to help. And if there's any way I can help, then do so. Because often I think if you're worried about saying the wrong thing, and so people who avoid ringing up and checking on someone because they're afraid they might make the situation worse, but actually that just leads to that person that's gone through a tough time being more isolated. So just be honest and say, I don't know what to say, but I'm here if there's anything I can do. And other things such as just raising the awareness about mental health issues. So just being more open and talking about it in your workplace, schools, homes, anything we can do to reduce the stigma. And as Alice said, get it as acceptable to talk about mental health as it is about physical health. And we need to try to change that perception that asking for help is a sign of weakness. It actually takes a lot of courage to ask for help. And just be aware generally of the organisations that are in your area, such as FCN, Samaritans, GP, Talkworks, and offer to make that first call on behalf of a friend or a colleague to those organisations, because actually picking up the phone and saying to someone, I'm struggling, is a really hard thing to do. So if you can say to that friend, oh, I'm aware of this charity, this organisation that can help, would you like me to call them on your behalf? Would you like me to be there when they come the first time? Can be a really good way of encouraging someone to seek help. And it's also about knowing how to look after yourself and looking after your own well-being. So we know things that having a good diet, a regular sleep pattern, being outdoors, as Ruth said, exercise, helping others, being creative, learning a new skill, practicing things like mindfulness can all help with our own well-being and resilience. So it's important that we look after ourselves as well so that we can support others. But I just want to say that also to bear in mind that sometimes people are so good at hiding their feelings that sadly suicides will still occur and that we can't always prevent them. And for those family, friends that are affected by that, that they shouldn't feel guilty that they maybe didn't pick up on a sign, because sometimes, you know, there isn't those obvious signs and symptoms, and you can't always prevent it. So it's trying to get that message across to those as well that have been affected by that. So I'm really looking forward to the questions that hopefully come in from people that are listening, and how really we can, as FCN, reach those that are in rural areas that maybe have no broadband, or those farmers that live alone that don't have any access to computers or don't know how to use them, and how we can let them know that we exist and what services are out there.
Thank you very much, Jo. There's an you were talking about the signs. There's an interesting comment on the chat from Edel Knox saying also somebody being overly exuberant, and I think we're all familiar with people who cover mental health issues by being, you know, centre of the party, noisy, and all the rest of it, and so on. You're asking really about how you can be able to link with people that have need of you. How do people know about FCN? What do you most rely on as your way of getting the message about FCN through into the rural community?
So we have a helpline that's fairly well publicised, that's available from 7 in the morning to 11 at night every day of the year, and that's 03000 111 999. We've got national websites. We've also got within Devon Twitter and Facebook pages for those that are on social media. We try to attend as many farming events as we can, and especially agricultural shows, so that the people that attend those know about us. We're at Exeter Market every Friday. We have a chaplaincy service there. And we try to work with lots of farming companies to say, rather than send a pen out to your farmers this Christmas, you know, would you maybe consider sending out some booklets about our works that you can reach them? So I'm really pleased that Molehaven have just agreed to send out some of our flyers before Christmas to every member, and we're hoping other organisations will follow that. So if there's anybody here watching that is maybe a member of a local vets or anything, and they'd be interested in sending out some information to all their farmers by post, then, you know, we can supply all that material for them.
Thank you very much. So just taking that a bit further to the panel as a whole, do you think there is room for greater partnership between organisations in order to get through to the farming community? I mean, can you see FCN and Devon Cornwall Police, or NFU Mutual and somebody else, a business, for example, that in a separate sector, working together and using their joint endeavours to get through to people? Because a lot of corporate social responsibility, and Ruth knows much more about this than I do, but a lot of corporate social responsibility is for one business. You're working for one business to improve its corporate social responsibility. But the issues are big, and sometimes they need more than one person to be working at it. And do you think there is room for partnerships and working together? Anybody that would like to? Joe, first of all, and then Mark.
Yeah, I think that's key, and it's for most of the organisations. You know, they want to look after their own employees, but actually, if farmers are their customers, then it's sort of, they have that duty of care to sort of widen their remit, that they're, as well as providing the service they do, whether that's a vet or a farm co-op, they're actually trying to look after the farmers' well-being. And I think we're beginning to see more organisations do that. And I've had several meetings with Martin, and he knows about our organisation and carries our literature, so that if they're on farms where there's issues, then they can promote us as well.
Yeah, thank you. Martin, you were going to come in.
Just to really reinforce that, we've worked in collaboration in so many aspects of policing now, and mental health is no exception. And I was only looking to date some of the good partnerships in the Southwest, and I've seen Somerset Mental Health and Agricultural Group. We've seen Devon and Somerset Standards Farming Partnership taking off, and you know, the more we can encourage agencies to come together, it's all for the better. And we're always learning, and we're always looking at new ways of working and reaching out. So you know, I'd love to see something develop even deeper, even though there's some great work going on in Devon, within Devon.
Okay, thank you very much. Ruth, would you like to come in? Yeah.
Yeah, and at the risk of echoing both those things, I think the role of business is absolutely critical to the sustainability of some of the charitable endeavours, and the sorts of things that we get involved with is not least donating money, which of course is really powerful in itself. But certainly this year and over the years, we're involved in using the power of our marketing and our communications functions. So, and what I can say this year has happened, which is absolutely fantastic, is that the charities have really come together with us, and that's just being more communicative in itself, in talking about how can we work more collaboratively, because we are far greater as one than we are apart. And I know in particular the Samaritans ran a Real People, Real Stories campaign, which is still ongoing. And I was absolutely delighted that FCN, RSABI, RABI, Rural Support, a Farm Safety Foundation all came together on it. And everyone's very, very keen to amplify each other's messages around the mental health arena. And why not? Because it can only be helpful if we do that. And on that note, FCN are about to launch its Time to Plan campaign, which is going to be across the next 6 to 7 months with key topics each month. Some of them around diversification, some on Brexit, but mostly the key message is about if you can plan more, then actually that's going to be far better for your mental health. And I'm sure Joe would echo the messaging around that. So we're absolutely getting on board with that ourselves, and hopefully we can make people more aware of what's there from FCN as well. It's on hand.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if you want to make a comment, Alice, in particular. I mean, if you'd like to.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that the main thing for me is when we're talking about rurally and within farming, just to all companies and businesses and organisations out there, please aim this at young people, at young farmers. The younger we can change the stigma around mental health and this kind of taboo, and change the language that we use, then generationally we're hopefully going to be stronger. You know, if we can instill it in younger people, the importance for speaking honestly to one another, using the right language. You know, when I did the suicide awareness training, one of the most important things they said was, if you're talking about suicide, use the word suicide. Don't dance around the subject in the hope that people know what you mean. So when we're talking about mental health, let's use the right words. Let's ask people, you know, how are you? How's your health? How's your mental health? And if we can instill those kind of skills and conversational skills in our younger people, whether it's coming from businesses or charities. It doesn't really matter, because as a community, it's better for all of us.
Thank you. I find it interesting. One of the roles I have is to do a bit with the royal family one way or another, and of course the younger royals championing mental health issues, I think, has made a difference. I think it's been seen as much more acceptable to talk about these things, and hopefully that's helped. Looking at the causes of mental health issues amongst farmers, one of the major issues, I suspect, is financial pressure. Financial pressure on farms and farmers, and the uncertainty that some farmers feel at the moment about the future, and with changing agricultural support systems and new trade arrangements and all the rest of it. Have you noticed, any of you, an increase in worry generally about how farmers are going to keep going and make a profit and so on? And do you think that is a contributing factor? And if so, what do you think can be done about that? And are there sort of coping mechanisms that you would recommend? Jo wants to come in on it.
Yeah, I think generally some of the causes is just that red tape and the uncertainty that farmers face, whether it's financial issues, the weather, and just so many things that are beyond their control. I think we've noticed at the moment it's been a bit quiet since COVID, because farmers haven't had maybe such the same effect on their business, in that they've still got their standard work to do and they've been able to get on with that to the vast majority of cases. But I think we're expecting, and we're beginning to see now, more cases coming in with general concerns about the future, especially those with financial reliability on maybe a second of income of tourism, those types of things, lets camping sites on their farms, that they've really suffered with that other stream of income not being there. And with Brexit, there is that concern about a new subsidy payment. What will that be like? How easy will it be to claim? And just sort of historically, when payments have changed in the past and a new system's come in, it's always taken 2 or 3 years for all the computer glitches to be ironed out and delays in payments. So I think that is a worry. So we're lucky within FCN, we have got contacts within RPA, so that if farmers are struggling and we can demonstrate that real financial pressure, that they might have problems meeting their rent or mortgage repayments, or it's causing them real mental health issues, we have been able to get percentage payments for those farmers just to tide them over. And FCN have tried to be more proactive recently, and as well as our standard website, we've got one called farmwell.org, which I've put in the chat. And that's really based on being more proactive and looking at how we can be more resilient as individuals, and also business resilience. So all the sort of new directives that come out from the government and things are all linked on there, as well as sections about general business resilience and planning and looking after yourself. So I would really recommend that people go to that website, and I've got a flyer here.
Thank you very much for that. Anybody else? Yeah, Ruth would like to come in on this.
Yeah, I'd echo what Jo just said. The Farmwell website is great. Definitely take a look at that. And at the risk of shamelessly plugging another organisation, David, that you're close to, the Prince's Countryside Fund, the Farm Resilience Programme has launched for its 5th year. And there are 2 locations in Devon that I would really urge people listening out there to take a look at. One in Dartmoor and one in Exmoor. And this is free business skills advice and environmental management training worth £2,000 per family farm. And there's 40 places up for grabs. So if you think that you or a family or a friend would be interested, and their main enterprise is livestock or dairy, you can sign up and take part in a series of 7 workshops due to start in about November time, I think, but it was all dependent on, obviously, restrictions, COVID related. There's business health check tools, there's talks on succession planning, accounts and budgeting, and one of the really important benefits of it is that it brings together like-minded farms in local groups. So you wouldn't be alone. You would be sort of sharing information and worries that other people are going through as well. And it's been proven to be highly successful. And as I say, 2 locations in Devon, Dartmoor and Exmoor. So head to the Prince's Countryside Fund web pages and you'll be able to locate the sign-up process from there.
Thank you, Ruth. I couldn't have asked for a better advert for the work of the Prince's Countryside Fund and the resilience work. Actually, when you see the difference it does make to people's individual farming businesses, it's fantastic, actually. So thank you for that advert. Anything else? I mean, Alice, you move amongst in the farming community, and I suspect one thing that people don't want to talk about is financial worries in amongst their friends and colleagues. But what do you think about the link between mental health issues and financial challenges that some farms have?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's a huge link. Even if you're not from a farming background, I think anybody who is going through financial worries, there's a the phrase that money doesn't make you happy, but it helps. When we're comfortable in different parts of our lives and when things are going well, then things are easier for all of us, and finances of course play a massive part in that. It'll be really interesting over the next couple of years, hopefully coming out of this pandemic and things changing with Brexit, how impacted the farming community is going to be through all of those things. And I can only really echo what my other panellists have said tonight about reaching out to the different organisations that are there. And let's, as a community, be people that care about one another. We can have these honest conversations with our friends, and the more that we do, the more that other people will know that we're the type of person they can come to and speak to about it. If we constantly shut difficult conversations down or make a joke of them, then people aren't going to want to seek help from us. And even if we don't know where to direct them, we can probably soon find out. So if we all just adapt the way we speak and the attitudes that we have towards these kind of difficult conversations about finances, about mental health, about physical health, then hopefully together as a rural community we can find support for one another.
Thank you. I'm just going to bring in Joe, if you can hold it for a moment. I want to bring in a different subject. It's quite a specific one, but then I want to ask Martin to start the answers on it. One of the things which is sometimes said in the debate about mental health is that farmers' access to shotguns is a risk, and for those that decide to take their own lives that way, there is quite a discussion about whether somebody should have arranged for the shotguns to be removed before anything happened, and very often they didn't want to, they didn't dare, they didn't know how to say that to a family member, and it's too late. Can I ask you, Martin, whether this is something that comes across your desk at all, or your colleagues, as to the difficult challenges for those within Devon Cornwall Police? I know that's not you, but those who have the responsibility for judging whether somebody is still in a fit state to actually have a shotgun certificate, a valid one. Is that something which is discussed at all in the rural issues that you have anything to do with?
I think directly it's something about having conversation with members of the public, perhaps at market. It's dealt with by a firearms department, and it's very difficult for them. We have a tremendous number of firearms certificates and shotgun certificate holders in Devon. Very difficult to keep an eye on all of them. Of course, if there's any risk to somebody misusing them, they will be removed. Perhaps that's not an easy thing to do, but it's how that's done. But if anybody ever has any issues or any concerns, if anybody who has, she said a shotgun, we know that shotgun's an important part of land management. It's key to their business as well. But equally, there's a responsibility that's looked after correctly. So not just mental health, could be anything. There's any concerns with shotguns or firearms, and we need to know. And that could be a very sensitive conversation. We understand that. So you know, get hold of your local police station, the local PCSO or the beat manager, and I just ask for a very confidential chat with them about what's going on. Because it's not just removing the shotguns, it's actually dealing with the issue itself. So their intention is just remove the guns, but actually let's look out a bit deeper and look at, well, what's going on here? You know, what help do you actually need rather than just remove the guns? So yeah, no, it's a really important point. And you know, nobody wants to remove people's firearms. They know that it's good for, you need to have them. But obviously, if it gets to that stage, then you know, we should be taking them.
Thank you very much. Jo.
Yeah, so from our point of view, if myself or any of our volunteers are going on to farms where the farmer does appear to be very low in mood and we are concerned potentially of that risk of suicide, then we often suggest to the family member that they hold the keys to the gun cabinet and put them somewhere different where they can't be found easily, so that a quick snap decision, someone who's feeling vulnerable can't have a quick access to them. We might often suggest as well, why don't you ask a neighbour to look after your guns, and you've got this easy online forms you can fill in through Devon Cornwall Police website to do a transfer, so that is done legally. It is really hard because often we find that shooting is a real sort of protective factor for farmers, and that's their hobby. They might enjoy clay pigeon shooting or rough shooting, you know, going out pheasant shooting. So it's always hard, but it's trying to get that balance of risk. And I think we always have to try and err on the side of caution, because, you know, we wouldn't like to think, oh, perhaps I should have had that conversation, perhaps, you know, we should have suggested that. So I think, you know, the easiest thing is just to ask a family member to take the keys and have them somewhere where they can't be found. And, you know, we have had farmers who have had their guns confiscated by the police. And we have supported them and worked with the police, you know, at future dates to be able to apply to get them back, which they have been able to do. So, you know, with their support, the GP, once their mental health is improved and they're stable, you know, GPs can assess them and saying, well, we don't believe there are, you know, any immediate risk, and they can successfully get them back. So it's trying to reassure farmers that it's not a forever thing. You know, just because you've had them confiscated doesn't mean you're never going to get them back again.
There are one or two, I think I'm right in saying that there are one or two rules that say you're not really meant to tell anyone else where the key is for your shotgun cabinet. And I have heard of people who've had their guns confiscated because they told somebody else in the family where the key was. So, you know, there are trip-ups, I think, sometimes that we have to be a bit careful about. I think, finally, just very quickly, it's going to be in about 30 seconds, but is there anything more that YFC could do, young farmers could do, than they're already doing in dealing with mental health? Anybody feel they've got something else? Jo, quickly from you.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly pick up on a couple of things. One that Alice said about changing the way we talk about suicide. So there's evidence to say, but if you ask somebody if they have contemplated suicide, you're not increasing them the risk of carrying it out. You're actually giving them permission to talk about it. So that's really important. And to try and change the terminology from saying someone's committed suicide to died by suicide, because it's no longer illegal, and it's trying to change the way we talk about it. And in terms of young farmers, I think the key thing this year is that because of COVID, because they haven't had to meet, it's the checking in on each other. And also this year, rather than focusing on raising lots of money for other charities, which, yes, we need it, but actually they maybe ought to be better if they've got spare money in their funds to actually look at subsidising more their own members' membership to county office, to keep those clubs going, to keep the county office going. Because if members leave because they can't afford it or think they might not get much benefit this year, it's going to be really hard to get them back on board and get things going again. So I think it's really key. They need to look at this next 6-12 months and really supporting themselves.
Thank you very much. Anybody else got anything for them? Yes, Ruth and Martin and then Alice, yeah. 20 seconds, Ruth.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think on top of that, maybe for the young farmers in particular, who may be more au fait with social media and reaching out and checking in, maybe not, but actually bearing in mind the older generation as well that are amongst them, whether that's their family members or their neighbour that lives 5 miles down the road or what have you. It's keeping an eye out for them, and I think I'm as guilty as the next person of thinking, oh gosh, you know, it's been 2 weeks since I did that, or a week, or what have you. And I think we all could just do with that human contact. And I know from Samaritan's research, they've said that they've had a huge increase in first-time callers, and some of the reasoning around that was just for human contact. So you know, there's no substitute for reaching out.
Okay. Thank you. Martin, quickly, and you've got about 10 seconds.
Very briefly, just ask yourself, do you have a friend who is feeling bad or low? Be proactive, reach out to them, be aware. Lastly, be mindful for yourself, and please look after yourself. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Alice, you've got about 5 seconds now.
Okay, so just a Young Farmers Club, be resilient, just look after each other, and you will come out of this year.
All right, well, thank you all very much, panelists. You've been brilliant, just what we wanted for this debate. And I'm handing back now to Helen, who's just going to conclude events. Thank you, Helen.
Thank you very much. First of all, a huge thank you to all of our panelists, Alice, Jo, Martin and Ruth. I think it's been a really important topic to discuss tonight, especially with everything else going on in the world. And you've all had some really good take-home messages and practical advice. So hopefully all of those in attendance have taken home some valuable messages, and we can all just look out for each other a little bit more. Jo did briefly mention it, but I just want to reiterate that Devon YFC are coordinating a 5 Steps to Suicide awareness course on the 13th of October. So that's 7 p.m. via Zoom. So just drop Devon YFC Facebook page a message or give them an email if you're interested in signing that up, just so we can help each other out and look out for each other. Once again, thank you to David for chairing this evening's meeting. And my final thank you has to go to NFU Mutual. We are incredibly grateful for the support they've given us for all of these debates. They wouldn't be happening without them. And also just the general support they've given Devon Young Farmers, not just this year, but the years gone by and the years in the future. So huge thank you to them. And that's it from me. Thank you and good night.
Thank you all very much.